Welcome, Corey Poirier, to the Balanced, Beautiful, Abundant Show.
Thank you so much. I'm super stoked to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. The second guest in a row from Canada. Our last guest was Rosalind Fung, who introduced me to you from Canada. So I'm in like some kind of Canadian vortex where I keep meeting coaches and speakers from Canada, which I'm totally good with because I think Canadians are awesome.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm sure we all appreciate it equally.
Yes, and you know the joke, right? We're the meth lab below Canada. You're the apartment above the meth lab that is America these days. So it's nice to see our upstairs neighbor and see some order in all the chaos that we're going through constantly in the United States lately.
Wow, I never heard of it that way before, but love that.
So let me tell my listeners a little bit about you. So Corey Poirier is a multiple-time TEDx speaker. He's the host of a radio show called Let's Do Influencing. He's the founder of Blue Talks. He's been featured on multiple TV specials. He's an international bestselling author, a columnist for Entrepreneur and Forbes magazine. He's been featured on CBS, CTV, NBC, ABC, and twice on the Entrepreneur on Fire show. And he's interviewed over 6,000 leaders and has spoken at Harvard University. So I'm so excited to have you on the show, Corey. Let's get right into it. I have lots of questions for you. So how did you become a motivational speaker?
So this is probably always the weirdest part to my story, I think, for many people. That's what people tell me is strange, is how I get into it was actually through stand-up comedy. And
oh, cool.
Yeah, and it gets even stranger because how I get into stand-up comedy is the bigger question. And so as somebody who was terrified of the idea of being on a stage, getting into stand-up comedy didn't seem very natural to me. And so what happened was I had a play in a fringe festival. I wrote and directed it. I did not want to be in the play. I didn't want to be in front of people. And what happened was one of the actors sprained his ankle, couldn't get his costume changes done as quick as before. Excuse me. So I had to actually write parts for somebody else to give him more time. And the problem was we were already into the play. So there's only one person that knows the parts beside the actor. And that's the writer director who doesn't want to be in the play. So I had to write myself some parts in the play that I didn't want to be in because we needed the extra time. And so I did that, and I was terrified, covered in sweat, everything you would expect. And so I asked one of the actors at the last day of the play's run, if I'm going to keep doing this, there's got to be a way around it. Do you have any suggestions? And he said, I don't know if this is the answer, but I'm going to a stand-up comedy workshop at the local university. Do you want to join me? And I was like, in my head, at first, I'm like, that sounds terrifying. But then I thought, it's only a ever have to get on a stage, and I can still learn more about writing and everything else I want to do. So I went to the workshop, and week number 3, we were told we were going to watch people entertain us, and we did our best to fill the room. I think we had like 100 people in a local nightclub for a comedy show that wasn't even a regular club. And so we marketed the heck out of it. And then about 5 minutes to showtime, I don't remember if it was me or somebody else, we looked over at this guy who got us into this. His name was Guy. And said, Guy, where are the entertainers? And he looked at us and said, you're looking at them. So we found out 5 minutes notice, zero material, we were going to be the entertainers. So I went to the bathroom to try to find an exit window to crawl out of. And there was no bathroom. So I was forced to come back out into the main lobby. Out of the 15 that paid to be in the workshop and showed up that night, 8 were gone. They'd walked out the front door.
They left. Okay.
Yeah. So the question is, what made me decide to get up? And I never used to I never used to share the answer. I should say I had the answer, but I didn't share it. I actually had this vision whenever I got out about me being an old dude at the bar talking to another old dude saying, see that comic up there? I was going to do that one time, and having the regret come over me that why didn't I? And so I decided then I was going to do it. But the new debate is who's going up first, because nobody wanted to be the first comic up, sacrificial lamb, as we call them. But I ultimately had been to Toastmasters once, realized if you're going to face a fear like this, do it first. Don't watch other people bomb before you. So I jumped on the stage, grabbed the mic, told my first joke. Thought it was the best joke that I'd ever told in my life, to dead silence. And all of a sudden, streams of sweat start coming down right away. Told a second joke, dead silence. Now I even think I saw a tumbleweed go by. It was just a mess. And finally, Guy, that got us into this, as I mentioned, his name, called me over to the corner of the stage. He gives me a schmuck in the back of his head, and he says, you idiot, what are you doing out there? We haven't even turned the mic on yet.
Ah.
So I was telling the material, the jokes, without the mic turned on. So everybody always just asked me what happened after that. Well, we got the mic turned on, told the jokes again, and they bombed again. It wasn't that they couldn't hear me. It was just the jokes, I guess, were bad or didn't resonate at least. And so told the jokes again, they bombed again. I think I'm the only comedian to probably ever bomb twice in 10 minutes with the same material. But what happened was, so this finishes the whole story, is I went back the week after that. Glutton for punishment, I don't know, but I went back and I went back and I went back. And ultimately, I performed 700 shows over 9 years in comedy.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, I didn't expect that to happen. But within that same first year, I went to see Tony Robbins with somebody else, and they were sitting beside me. And they said, "Can you believe he gets paid to do this?" And I said, like, record scratch, stop everything, hold the fire. And what do you mean somebody gets paid to do what I'm paying $5 to go to a comedy club to do? And they don't have to deal with hecklers or alcohol? What? And so I wanted more of that. So I basically convinced the local community college to let me teach a sales course. It took almost a year to convince them. It's kind of appropriate. I had to sell them on a sales course, and they had never done that before. So it took me a year to teach, to sell them on it. Eventually, they let me teach the course. And really, I don't want to say the rest is history, because there's a lot of history in between there. But the truth is, that's how I started my speaking journey. Because what happened was they started going out to college and they were selling their courses, and people would say, "Well, we can't send all our staff to come in. Is there any way he could come to our company and do that?" And that's really when it all started. And, that's almost 20 years ago now. So that was the long answer to say it's a very unique way to get into speaking.
That is unique. So what motivates you when you're feeling demotivated? How does a motivational speaker motivate himself?
So that's a great question. It's like an enigma within a riddle. So what I would say is this: for me, I actually do this thing where I don't know if there's a name I could give to it, and I do. People always ask me too, what do you do before you walk on the stage? And this is what I do. So I used to do meditate a little bit, but then you realize you're at the front table with the host of the event and you can't really sit there and meditate while they're talking to you. So I had to figure out a shorter way to do this. And it's the same thing I do when I'm having a crappy day. Basically, I remind myself of one or two testimonials that people share with me that I changed their life. So I get myself in. So basically, I guess you would call it reframing. I do a behavioral thing where I say, think about the best day of your life. Think about a time when somebody said, I went to your talk. There's one guy, for example, I used to use this one on myself all the time, but it was a gentleman who was about 60. And I was actually meeting him for a different purpose. We were at a networking event together, and I met him at his house, and we were chatting. He said, I watched you on Eastlink TV like 8 years ago. And you talked about how you retired when you were 20 years of age because you stopped working and you started doing only that which you loved. So he said, I was retired at 20 years of age. And he said, I thought, I'm 60 and I'm not retired yet. I want to be that guy. I want to have that guy's life. And he said, you inspired me to change my career. And at the time when he said 60, he was probably 52 when he watched it, because I remember it was 8 years specifically before. Well, just reminding myself that I could have that impact on him when I didn't even know for those 8 years that he even watched that talk or it impacted him. So yeah. I basically remind myself of those. And then the other thing I do is I constantly feed myself what I call posits, which is essentially just a short version for positive deposits. And so what I do is I'll read a Zig Ziglar quote in the morning when I get up, or I'm reading right now, for those that are on Facebook and can see us, I'm reading Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, which was the follow-up to Think and Grow Rich, but didn't get released for 70 years because his wife didn't want it released because of the name and the nature of it. But the point is, I read every day. And so I'm reading stuff by him. One of the quotes just today we talked about in a mastermind that I read from him was, it's along the lines of, with every adversity comes an equal seed of opportunity. And I'm paraphrasing.
Love that.
But just reading a quote like that to remind me that these times when I was worried about something that didn't matter a year later anyway, almost every time I was worried about it or said this is the worst thing ever happened to me, the best thing that ever happened to me came as a result of that worst thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the Chinese character for opportunity and crisis is the same exact character.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So it's literally a change of perspective to take something from a crisis to an opportunity. It's all how you frame it.
100%.
I had a mentor tell me, unless there's a fire truck and a police officer outside your door, it's not a crisis.
So
make it run in our head.
Yeah, and I think it's all about reframing. And so that's what I do. But I'll tell you, you just made me think of a story I heard one time. Arnold Schwarzenegger had that movie Pumping Iron from the 70s. And I remember he shared this, and some people would take this wrong, but Well, actually, there was two stories. So I'll tell you the one that you wouldn't take wrong, because it leaves open less room for a lot of talk about that one thing. But he talked about how if he has a rental car when he go and let's say to prepare for the event, and let's say he's the day of competition or the day before, and he's working out and he's in front of a window and his car's out there and he can see a thief stealing his car. What would most people do? They would run out, they would scream, or they would, if they were scared, they would stay there, but their body would tense up. And he said,
Yeah.
"Well, I'm competing for a competition. I can't let this ruin my frame of mind. I'll figure out the car stolen thing later." So he said, "I will watch the person stealing the car and keep working out, or I might
Wow.
even turn around and let them steal the car and deal with it later." But he said, "I can't take myself into that mind frame and still be world class."
Well, I feel terrible because I was working out this morning to a video on YouTube and my dog was trying to jump on me and biting my sweatshirt, and I totally gave in and I played like pillow wrestling with him. So I should be inspired by that movie and say, you know what, dog, I'm working out.
And it probably, I mean, like everything in life, I think there's always context involved too. Like maybe
Right.
what you needed, maybe what the synchronicity of why that happened is you needed the time with the dog. Maybe the dog was saying you need this playtime. So you can always look at everything in a different perspective. You also have to ask, when I'm doing that workout, yes, it's serious, but it's a 1-day workout. You're not probably going to compete for the Olympics in weightlifting. I'm not, I know that. And
I'm not. It was
so
a
if I'm
great excuse to stop doing those diamond push-ups. I was like, I'd much rather play with the dog.
100%. So that's how I look at it. I think you always have to take context into account as well. But the Arnold thing, I think, is saying, like, if you're working at world class at whatever you're doing right now, you're doing an interview at world class, then don't let yourself think about the grocery list or be distracted, because that's not world class. I mean, that's how I look at it.
It's about being present.
100%.
And that's the same thing as meditation. Like thoughts are going to go by and distract you, but you don't have to like attach to those thoughts and focus on those thoughts. You can focus on your breath or your mantra. And it's about choosing where you focus. We get to choose where we focus. A lot of people don't know that. They're in reaction mode all the time, and their mind is just like a ping pong match and it gets snagged by every little distraction. But we get to choose our focus, which I think is so empowering.
Yeah, I'll add to that. There's a great equation. I mean, I have it etched in board. My girlfriend etched it in a board, and it's at home. We're at the new house, so we haven't put it up yet, but we need to. But the equation is E plus R equals O. And not my equation. I think I discovered it from Jack Canfield, who said, not my equation. And he learned it from C. Clement Stone, his mentor, who probably said, not my equation. So I don't know where it came from originally. But the gist of it is this: E is for event, R is for response, and O is for outcome. And
Yeah.
the idea is you can never control the event. You can't change the fact that the price of gas goes down. You can't change that somebody's stealing the car. You
Yeah.
can't change whatever the event is, the recession, COVID. I mean, let's be honest. You can't change the event. But what you can choose, this is to your point, the only thing you have control over is choice. You can't control how you respond to that. And by the way, there's a reason, in my opinion, we say respond and not react, because that's a totally different thing. So I use respond for the R. And then the cool thing is you get to dictate your outcome based on that response you chose. So you can't change the event, but you can change what happens as a result of you being impacted by the event. And that equation has saved me so many times. Now, here's a catch. I got to always add, because I never used to. The plus sign for me is the pause. It's the breath.
Yes.
Because what most people do, if you get caught up in traffic and somebody gives you the middle finger, that's the event. Most people react because it's the natural thing to do. But if you took time, if you could remind yourself, I need to pause, like my mother always said, take a breath and think about how you're going to react. Think about that for a minute and say, what outcome do I want? Do I want somebody to chase me down and pull a gun on me? I'm not saying it's going to be that dramatic, but it could be. Do I want to be fist fighting with somebody in the middle of the road or yelling at people from my window? And that energy that comes with that. Or would I maybe, just maybe, like to drive away from this like it never happened? And so, I know somebody does something really funny with this. They'll say, maybe they need a poop. So like they say, like maybe they need to go to the bathroom, and it's not about me at all. But there's a big brilliance in that, which is the fact that it's never about us. It's almost, I should say, not never, but it's almost never about us. And so what if you can actually go, you know what, reframe it, as we said earlier, and say, maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe this happened. Maybe I've so many grateful things I'm grateful for in my life. Maybe they just lost their job.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can change that reframing, that'll change everything. And that's why that E plus R equals O changed everything for me. So, if somebody has one takeaway today about reframing, I would say, think about that equation. How are you responding to the events in your life? Because whether you like it or not, the responses you have today are probably going to be the outcomes you also have 5 years from now.
Absolutely. And the outcome you're having today is from the responses you had 5 years ago.
100%.
So we can control how we respond. So the next question I want to ask you is, what is the difference? I know you're the founder of Blue Talks, and I'm so excited to be giving a Blue Talk with you at Harvard. Woo woo. COVID, allowing, who knows what's going to be happening in April, but whenever we're allowed to go to Harvard, we're going to go there and give a Blue Talk. So can you tell my audience the difference between a Blue Talk and a TED Talk?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a very distinct difference. And then I'll sort of make a little joke for people that are trying to visualize it immediately. I may have to stop using this soon because I'm sure somebody will talk to me about stopping using it soon. But if you picture Ted and Chicken Soup for the Soul having a baby, to me, that's Blue Talk. But the reason I say that, it really does explain the difference, is TED Talks typically, and I'm going to speak generalized, but typically they're not big on, and you don't see many of them, what we'll call spirituality or woo-woo or things like energy healing or holistic health and stuff like that. And it's just not their lane, if you will. And so I had students I have a speaking program and a brand to talk program that were coming to me saying, I want to get on a stage like TEDx and I want to release my inner woo. And
Yes.
so that was really a big part of the catalyst for Blue Talks. So what Blue stands for, it's BLU, is business, life, universe.
Yeah.
And so the universe is the spirituality side, which was the catalyst for it all. But because I'm big on business and life stories, I didn't want to lose that either. So to me, it's a marriage between those three. It's somebody getting, whether it's on a stage, and there's multiple platforms for it. So somebody either getting on a stage, writing a part in a book, speaking on our podcast, or being on our virtual stage, talking about either life story, a business message, or the universe, whatever that includes, or a combination of all three of those. And those 4 ways I said it right now, Rebecca, are the 4 platforms that we're on. So we're on iTunes, we're on the books on Amazon, we're on YouTube, of course, and then we also do the virtual event through various different platforms. So the difference really is in the idea of how the message is delivered and what the message contains. And really, we tend to lean not fully more woo-woo, but we tend to lean in that direction a little more than, say, TEDx was. And that's why I said it's a mix between Chicken Soup for the Soul, because they're a little bit more on the woo-woo side and inspiration and stuff like that. Whereas TEDx openly says we're not looking for motivational speakers. Well, in our perspective, we're looking for motivational speakers, but also non-motivational speakers. We want to mix the two of them together. Hopefully that sums it up in a really quick nutshell.
Yeah, business, lifestyle, universe. I love it. So you are the columnist for Entrepreneur and Forbes magazine. What are your columns about?
Wow. It's funny because I've been on a little bit of a break, was writing for both. And so I have to think about what was the last ones I wrote about. But really, it's a mixture between around 3 different areas. One is finding your why. Another one is, it's one of my talks, is called The Timeless Secrets of Influential Leaders. And so it's what have I discovered after interviewing at this point now over 6,500 thought leaders.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's not a typo. Like, that's not an error. I mean, it's insane when I think about it. And then the third thing I talk about, of course, is speaking, how to crush it on stages. So my articles, if I think back through them, they're a mixture of those 3 areas, which, not surprisingly, those are my kind of 3 focus areas as a speaker and also when I'm helping people.
So I know we don't have time for your whole talk on finding your why, but can you give my listeners a couple helpful hints or some direction in finding their why?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll do it very quickly, but I'll give you the exercise that I first start with people to help them start the journey. So here's the thing. To me, your why is a mixture between your passion and your purpose. Mm-hmm. And so passion to me, I'll explain that for people that might be saying, aren't they the same? Passion to me is what you do. Purpose is why you're doing it.
Ooh,
so what you're doing could be speaking on stage. It could be stand-up comedy. It could be playing music or guitar, whatever, writing songs. The why you're doing is a totally different thing. The why could be to create a positive ripple in other people's lives. It could be to change the world, but it's a different thing. And what I found is your passion can change 1,000 times in your life. Your why, or your purpose, I should say, won't change as often, maybe never. And so, first of all, it's understanding what those 2 are. But why that's significant is people get sick of hearing people say, find your passion or you won't be fulfilled. What I would say is, again, you could have multiple passions that lead to your purpose. But what I found is the gateway to get to your purpose or your overall why is through your passion. So that's why I talk about them both interchangeably. So here's the exercise. So if you want to find, if somebody's listening and they haven't found their passion yet, what they love doing, what I would say is what you want to do is get a piece of paper. The easiest way to do it, draw a line down the center and say, what are the things that I love doing? And so what you want to do is start building a list of, here's what I love doing. Then you want to ask yourself, what is the thing I would do if money wasn't an issue? If you won the lottery, because everybody loves to say, I'd go to the beach and never work again. But guess what? A month later, you'd be bored. Most people would be bored. And so what the question is, what would you come back and do after you get bored and quit on the beach thing? What did you want to do when you were a child? What, and this is a huge one, whenever you wanted to do something and somebody said, you can't do that, it's not practical. What was this intersection there? So you can't go to clown college because it's not practical. You need to go to Harvard. Let's just say that's the example. So go back to that spot and figure out what was the mix there. What is it that you love doing and people say you're good at? So what I'm getting you to do is make this list. And it could be, I'm just going to say 10 things.
Yeah.
Could be, as I said, playing guitar, could be photography, could be any, whatever they are to you. Then what I want you to do is put them in the order of what's the most important. What's the one you couldn't live without and what's the one you could live without? And the reason I say that is I'm all about efficiency. And if you want to tackle these things, you might as well start with the one that has the biggest chance of being your passion. The next thing you want to do is you want to dissect those things and say, okay, let's say it was stand-up comedy. So now the question is, what are the 5 things I'd have to do to eventually get on a stand-up stage? Maybe it means reading a book on comedy. Maybe it means going to the local comedy club and taking the comic out for lunch. Whatever that looks like, you want to list those things out. And here's where it finishes off. You want to start with those one at a time, the small baby steps. And every time you do one of those, you want to give yourself a reward because that's going to make you want to do the next one. And by the time you're done of all the small steps, in theory, taking that step on the stand-up stage shouldn't be that scary anymore because you've already taken these scary steps beforehand. So rather than you taking this one big step toward it, what I'm suggesting is figure out what are likely your passions and then take baby steps to eventually try them so that eventually you can say, yes or no, this is really my passion. Now, here's the caveat. Most people would say, well, that could take me months. My answer to that is, and? So you build a list of things that you think you love doing. You don't watch the clock when you do them. You get excited doing them and you're bothered that it might take 3 months when, let's face it, most people spend almost their whole lives without ever finding their passion or purpose.
That's
so
true.
To me, that's an exercise. You could spend 3 months doing stuff you love only to find out it's 5th on the list, but it's definitely a shorter path and you have fun doing it. And that's what I would suggest people do. And don't worry about how do I get paid for my passion? Because the truth is, if it's really your passion, you won't care about how much you get paid to do it. So that's my, maybe 3 or 5 minutes about how to find your why. Because once you find the passion, once you have that passion found, this is what I was getting at, and you start living that passion and doing stuff within that passion, eventually the purpose will show itself.
Yes.
So with my comedy we talked about, I discovered speaking. And then what happened is, as doing that for a while, I got the power of impacting people's lives and creating a positive ripple. And I wanted more of that. So now my mission statement, my purpose mission statement is to be the guy that motivates, donates, inspires, educates, and entertains.
I love it.
And that's all a result of me finding my why, which started with me finding my passion, which led to my purpose. So hopefully that gives a good overview in a very short amount of time.
I love that. And the spiritual teacher, Abraham Hicks, says, if you're doing what you love and you're happy, your purpose will find you, which is similar.
So 100%. So agree. And that's the whole thing. The benefit of going down the passion road is it's easier to find something you love to do and spend your time doing. And then that's what you just said. I didn't verbalize it like that, but the truth is the purpose part eventually just comes to you. Like for me, it came to me after I started living that. It was like, wow, I'm living on purpose. And I know what my purpose is now. But it wasn't like this exact sat down and went, okay, now that I found my passion, what is my purpose? It actually, the passion part was the harder part. And then the purpose came.
Absolutely. So the other column, the other thing you write about is after interviewing 6,500 leaders, what is their common trait? What do they all have in common?
Wow. So I'll give you the most common, but maybe I'll give you a second one, Rebecca, because the first one is actually related to what we just talked about. So it wouldn't be new to people if I tell you, but I have to also be factual. So the number one most common trait is that the highest of achievers are living on their purpose, or you could say living on purpose, whichever you choose. But essentially, they're doing they're doing what they were put here to do. They're doing that good work. And so what I found is, and they don't have to be living with passion, because that's, again, the misnomer, but it's just, I find it's an easier path to get there, but they're living on purpose. So they're doing what they were called to do, and they're doing what they were, what they feel best doing. That's the most common one. So that, again, like 98% of the people that I've interviewed are living their purpose. So that's that part. But I'll give you an extra one just to be fair, and I'll just randomly pick one. I'll pick the power of no, is what I'll pick. And so another common trait I found with high achievers is that they say no. And I'm going to throw a number out. I mean, I'm not exactly 100% a target with this, but I would say around 10 times more than everybody else.
Wow.
So what does that mean? It means that if you ask them, will you come on my show? If you ask them, will you do this job for me? There's a better odd they're going to say no. And as far as on the achievement level, the more they're doing and the more they're keeping track of and the more they're juggling, the more no's they're going to probably be saying. So much so that eventually, you think about Tony Robbins, let's say, eventually you get to the point where you have 80 people in your company that have to say no for you at every different angle when somebody's trying to reach you to see if you can say yes. And I say that because you think about it, what are the odds you could pick up the phone if you've never done it before and had no contacts and reach Tony Robbins on the phone line?
I do know someone with a cell phone who says masseuse, but yeah, that doesn't count. If I didn't know her, yeah.
If that didn't exist, the odds are pretty close.
Yeah.
100%. So it'd have to be close to zero, right? And same, Jack Canfield, when we did the interview with him, I mean, I could tell you how long it took to get that interview, and there were a lot of no's in the path.
I don't have his access to him.
Okay, well, but I mean, the interesting part is that he doesn't even say, like, I think Jack would have a hard time saying no, just his personality. And so he has people within his organization that know, okay, well, Jack could never take this on even if he wanted to. He has another thing conflicting with it or what have you. So what I found is that these high achievers, even if they don't like doing it, they're forced to say no more often. So here's the takeaway from that is, if you're just starting, maybe practice saying no to some of the easier things to say no to, and start getting used to saying no, because eventually you're going to have to say no to some things to say yes to some other things.
And I like telling my students, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. Walk away from the hell maybes.
I love that. Well, and I'll give people a little hint as to what I do. I shared it with you earlier. I said my 5 points mission statement. So to motivate, donate, inspire, educate, and entertain. So if you ask me to take something on, the first thing I do is I have those listed, and I'll go, is it any of those? If it's zero, it's a hell no. If it's halfway between, it's probably a maybe, and that could be a decision of mine if I want to take it on. But if it's 4 or 5 of those, it's a hell yes. And by the way, without regret. As soon as I look at that, I'm going, done. I know it's not in alignment with me. And so by coming up with that mission statement, it allowed me to decide what a yes and a no were. So I do the same thing. It's either a hell yes or it's a hell no. And if it's a hell maybe, then it's maybe 1% of the time that it'll end up getting done.
Yeah, and I, as a recovering people pleaser and validation addict, sometimes it's hard to say no. And I know Tim Ferriss talks about that a lot on his podcast, like that the wealthy, successful people, not that wealth is success, which is probably going to be my next question. How do you define success? But the successful people are good and adept at saying no, and they're not people pleasing. They don't try to take care of the people's feelings because they know their time is valuable and they only have so much time in a day.
Yeah, I'll actually give people listening another hint as far as how you can do it in a way that you don't burn bridges. And this, again, credit where it's due, was Shailene Johnson, depending on how you want to pronounce Shailene's name, who's people might know her from Turbo Jam. She had the Turbo Jam craze, which would be similar to P90X, or she's an Instagram influencer as well. And she's a best-selling author. And so I was asking her, how do you juggle everything? How you juggle, like, you're running a big company. I mean, I think they sold 6 million copies of that DVD. I mean, you're running a big company. She had, like, I think at one point, like 500 or 600 people teaching her class at different locations in the US. And I said, how do you juggle all this? And she told me what she does, which I think is so brilliant, is she said that because her family it's a family first type company, and everybody that knows her knows that, she always says, when somebody says, Shailene, can you help me with this? She always says, look, I got to talk to Brett, her husband, and just double check we don't have anything with the family that's going to interfere. Can I get back to you in a couple of days and let you know? And that does so many things. First of all, how do you get mad at somebody that says, I want to see if it's okay with my kids and my husband if we take this time. Secondly, within 2 days, some people probably already, and she didn't say this part, but I'm thinking some people will probably get their own solution to it. But then the other part is if she wants to take it on, she can decide that, and it gives her time to think about it rather than being put on the spot. And then what she also says is, if I can't help you with it, then I'll find somebody that can. How do you get mad at somebody like that?
Yeah,
but the thing she's doing is not burning a bridge, but she's still saying no for now. No for now.
I like that. I use that too. Let me think about that and get back to you, and then try to refer them to someone who can help. That's a good thing. So that's
Absolutely.
the next question. How do you define success? For me, it's the amount of joy I feel. So what is your definition of success?
It's kind of twofold. On one hand, it goes right back to what we've been talking about a lot, which is my why. How often am I living my why? How often am I serving others in alignment with my why? So that's one way, which again has nothing to do with wealth financially at all. I mean, it has to do with being a wealthy person, but doesn't have to do with money at all. The second way, though, and this is kind of borrowing from somebody else, but Bob Dylan had this great quote that I love. Back then, the quote was always a man. So he said a man, but I'm going to say a man or a woman who goes to bed at night and gets up in the morning, and in the hours in between, does that which they love, is a success.
I love it.
And they both kind of marry together. But really what I'm saying is if I'm spending my time in alignment with my purpose, then I'm successful. And because the rest will work itself out if I'm doing that. If I'm not doing that, I'm probably not successful because the rest won't work itself out.
Yeah, I love that. If you're doing what you love, you're a success. And I think things are shifting, especially with COVID. The whole world is reinventing and changing success. And I like to say that U-Hauls do not follow Hertzes. We didn't come onto this earth and take an incarnation to accumulate stuff. That's not why we're here. We're here for a bigger purpose.
Absolutely. And this doesn't relate to accumulating stuff, but I think it's a powerful quote that's sort of indirectly related, but I love this. Robin Sharma had this quote. So for people who don't know who Robin is, he wrote The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari and a whack of other books.
That's a great title. I've never heard of that. The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari.
Oh my gosh. It's I think it's 8 or 9 million copies sold now. It's
wow.
Mega bestseller. And he's from actually Port Hawkesbury, Nova Scotia, Canada. And he was a lawyer, successful lawyer, threw in the towel. So I think indirectly he's the monk who sold his Ferrari.
Right.
But it's like loosely based on his life. He wrote the book, printed it out of Kinko's, printed I think 500 copies, sold them out of the back of his car doing chamber and rotary talks. And then HarperCollins, the CEO, showed up at a book signing without knowing, just going to pick up books. And Robin talked to him and didn't even know who he was. He shared his philosophy, and he got a call the next Tuesday saying, hey, he wants to meet with you. And he said, oh, who is he? And he said, oh, he's the publisher of HarperCollins. He didn't tell you that? Now the book sold whatever million copies, and he has The Leader Who Had No Title is another one of his big books, and The Greatness Guide. So Robin said in an interview with him a number of years ago, he said that his father told him this when he was younger, that a person should live, and I got to get this right, but live in a way that when you're born, you cry and the world rejoices. But when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. And to me, that's another way I measure success. Do I have a book that if I was writing this book and I closed the chapter today, if today was the last word in the chapter, would I be happy with the book?
Yeah.
And I'm completely happy. I'm 5 volumes in and I'm happy with every page. So that's how I define success.
So what's this guy's name? Robin who?
Sharma.
How do you spell that?
Sharma.
Okay, yeah. So for my listeners, if you haven't heard of him, check him out. The Man Who Sold His Ferrari, and the other one was what?
So there's The Greatness Guide. I think one's called Who Will Cry When You Die.
Oh, wow.
The title I just said. The Leader Who Had No Title was one of his other really big sellers, which is about the fact that you can be a leader without having to have the title of a leader. And so it was a customer service almost type book. And then The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari was his first one. Like that's the one that opened all the doors. And I think the idea was if I remember correctly, it was a lawyer in the book who basically sold his Ferrari and went and became a monk. So that's where the title comes from, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. He was a monk after he sold the Ferrari.
Wow, I love that. I love that. So out of all these leaders that you interviewed, who did you learn the most from in the interview? What was your biggest wow, aha moment? And which of these leaders really impacted you the most?
It's honestly a tough one, and I'm one of those people that I don't like, because I know a lot of people will go, they'll write down and say who was the person and what was the quote, and I don't do that because I like to go with intuition. And so I'm going to give you a two-part answer, only for one reason, because one is Robin Sharma, and to me it would be like almost like a cop out to only say the one we were just talking about. But
Right.
what's really wild is during that interview I had a toothache from heck, and I had to drink water to keep it from hurting while I was doing the interview with this guy that I'd waited to do the interview with for a long time. And I drank like, I don't know how much water, like gallons. So I needed the bathroom. And so it was a weird interview, but even in that, he was so brilliant that I still remember all kinds of things that he said within the interview. So like he talked about how the importance of reverse engineering your life. So what do you want to be when you're 80 sitting on the doorstep? And if that's the case, what do you have to do today and every 5 years to get there? And it was something he learned from Warren Buffett, I believe. But the point is that he just was delivering things like all these things. Oh, one of the things I love that he said was, if you were, most people die at the age of 20, but they wait until they're 80 to bury their body.
Wow.
And they're the zombies, he calls them, that are walking around with no purpose. And it's not to blame anybody or say, it's your fault because you haven't found your purpose. But he said, it's the Walking Dead. They're not really living a fulfilled life. And sadly, we know that's a large percentage of people. The book I showed, the Outwitting the Devil, Napoleon Hill talks about how in the book, the devil brags that he has, because it's an interview with the devil brags that he actually controls 98% of the people in the world.
Wow.
Through the parts in their mind. And so, I mean, if that's the case, even if it was close to that, that tells us that those are the people that haven't found their purpose yet.
Right.
I'm using the word yet because we can always find it, even if they hear this interview and say, well, this guy seems like he's on something. He's so hyper and passionate. I want more of that, and they don't know this, but I get up every day the same way. No coffee, no nothing. This is me. That's for all intents and purposes. But that was one. And then if I had to think of one more, probably, and this was another game changer, and I hate to pick two names that are fairly well known, but I have to be true to the question. So the other one would probably be Jack Canfield. And why, what I remember that he said that just mind blown when it happened was he talked about his hour of power that he does every day. And so his hour of power for Jack is he spends 20 minutes exercising, 20 minutes reading, 20 minutes meditating every day. That's how he spends the first hour of his day before most people wake up. So to me, I see that as he's feeding his mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah.
Before most people wake up. And because he shared that in the interview, and he said, if people say they don't have enough time, but the average North American watches 3 to 6 hours of TV a day.
Wow.
So he said, just give up one of those hours or just get up an hour earlier. But he said that if everybody in America would be doing that, I think he said America time or North America, we would drastically change the world. And I believe that. And so what do I? Yes, I do it. So that's why I changed my way of thinking in life, is because I started practicing it. Do I do it 7 days a week? No. I don't usually do it on weekends at all. I don't think he does either, but that's a reach. I can't remember. But I do it probably 3 days consistently a week, and then the other 2 off and on. So in other words, I'm not doing it. I can't say 5 days every week, but the other book Robin Sharma has is the 5 a.m. Club. And he said in the book.
Oh, that's very famous. Now that one I've heard of.
Okay, so that's one of his other books. And he said, people always ask me, do you do it every day? Because he's the 5 o'clock guy. And he said, no, there's days I want to sleep in. And sleeping in, I think, is like 7:30. But anyway, he said, I don't do it every day. So I'm okay to say, no, I don't do the hour power every day. But I learned about it like 15 years ago from Jack, and I'm still doing it 3 days a week. And it's changed my life. So much so that it's crazy that I don't do it 5 days. It's crazy that I let days slip. But yeah, we're human.
Is that where you get most of your reading done, is during that hour of power?
Yeah, but and here's the thing. This is really weird, but I didn't read my first book until I was 27. And so I think I'm trying to make up for lost time.
Wow.
I'm trying to because I didn't discover books. I read 4 that were prescribed in school, and I only read the first chapter and stuff. And so because I didn't start reading until later than everybody, I think I'm I got to get all these books read. And so I read, the first book I ever read was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And not surprising, you heard me talk with Napoleon Hill. For those that are watching video-wise, this is not a coincidence.
Corey, I'm so glad you like the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right, Corey? I mean, Corey, yes. It's a great book. Because they tell you to use a person's name all the time when you're trying to win friends and influence people.
Absolutely, I caught that. And one of the quotes from that book is, you can gain more friends in 4 hours, and I might have the timeline wrong, might be 4 weeks or 4 days, by trying to get interested in them than you can in 4 months of trying to get them interested in you.
That is true.
And it's so powerful. And same with the name, right? And you notice that certain times I said to Rebecca, I've inserted that in there. I never lost the Carnegie thing, but I think it's good human etiquette anyway. But having said that, back to the original point about books, is I read more than 20 minutes a day with books. It's the one I go overboard with, because like I read usually at night. Most nights before I go to sleep, I'll read for about a half hour. And then I read usually in the morning at some point for about a half hour or more. Then I listen to audiobooks. Then I do interviews with people, which is still like, to me, like learning in that way. So I have my learning one locked down.
Yes, that is definitely one of your strengths. So Corey, how can people stay in touch with you?
So if I can, I'd like to give people a freebie, something that they can take away and keep learning. Because like a book, like a speaker, if you see the speaker, but you don't read a book or anything after, it might be great at the time, but if you don't apply it. So I'd like to give people a book they can take some stuff from. So we talked very briefly about speaking. But that's one of my things I help people with, is getting on stages. And so I have a book called The Book of Public Speaking, which people can get for free, digital book. It'll get sent directly to you, and you can find it, surprise, surprise, at thebookofpublicspeaking.com. So head over to thebookofpublicspeaking.com, grab that book. And I really feel if you connect there, then you'll be connected with us anyway. You'll be in the loop. If you want to go one step further, or if the speaking thing is just absolutely not for you, then you can certainly find me at thatspeakerguy.com. And if you go on there, at the top on the right is all my social media handles where you can connect with me. So that's kind of the hub.
Well, Corey, I really appreciate your enthusiasm. I wish I could have your energy with no caffeine. I love it. And everyone, he has 2 young kids, one 3 years old, one 3 months old. So we know you're not sleeping a lot either.
If you want, take vitamin P. If you ask me a takeaway message, vitamin P is, the P is for passion and purpose. You can never buy it in the store ever, and it's the most important vitamin you'll ever take. I take vitamin P every day. It takes good care of me.
Vitamin P and positive, right?
Absolutely. I think P is my most important letter. Maybe that's the value letter to me.
Passion, purpose, positive. So everyone, take your vitamin P. Please share this podcast with someone you love. We don't have sponsors. We rely humbly on your sharing and promoting this podcast. Share it on your social media. Take a screenshot and tag me on Instagram or Facebook. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to the Balanced, Beautiful, Abundant podcast. And I can't wait to see you again with another incredible guest. Thanks, Corey. You're amazing.
Thanks, Rebecca. My pleasure.